Welcome
recording in progress.
Okay, we're recording. Hey, welcome to the third session for the day. My name is Brent Toombs. I'll be moderating this next session. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a TV and film guy that lives in Belize City, and even though I don't sound like it, I am a Belizean, proudly naturalized Belizean. I have been here for a little over 22 years and absolutely love working in the industry here. Today, this afternoon, we're going to talk about visual effects. And visual effects has actually been part of filmmaking since 1895, when Alfred Clark used stop motion film to film the reenactment of a beheading of Mary, Queen of Scots. Now, in 126 years since, visual effects have been used, camera tricks have been used to create virtual images that do not exist in the real world. But it's only recently that the technology has gotten so good that filmmakers are now able to blur the line between real and virtual worlds, and it's almost impossible to notice. And it's becoming affordable and accessible, even for filmmakers here in Belize. Now, we have three guests joining us this afternoon. First, I'd like to introduce Oliver Newman, who's a film editor, a producer, and the manager at Freebutter. My German's not too good, Oliver. Forgive me if I didn't say that right. Freibutter Films in Vienna, Austria. And one of his films, Hinterland, is an official selection this year at the Belize International Film Festival. And what's exciting about Hinterland was it was shot almost entirely on blue screen using virtual visual effects. Also joining us from Canada is Bruce Woloshin. He's a visual effects supervisor. And over the past 30 years, he's worked on numerous major motion pictures, network television series, and TV commercials. Just a few of his credits would include Twilight, Red Dawn, RoboCop, San Andreas, and the Power Rangers. And I should also disclose that Bruce is also a very good friend of mine in the real world. In fact, we both started our television careers together at a very small television station in northern Saskatchewan back in the mid-'80s. In fact, I think Bruce may have even trained me my first few days on the job. So it's really great to have you here. And we also have Joe joining us from New York. Joe is the owner-manager of Jet Sets, which is a studio facility that has green screens, cameras, all the things that a filmmaker like Oliver would need to shoot a film like Hinterland. So Joe, thank you very much for joining us. I think I'd like to start though with Hinterland. You know, it is an official selection of the film. I had a chance to screen it over the weekend. It's absolutely fantastic. I won't say anything more about it. I'll just ask Oliver to tell us a bit about his film, and if possible, if you have a trailer that you could show us, that would be fantastic, Oliver.
Yeah, for sure. Hello to Belize. It's a great pleasure joining you online. I had the pleasure to be in Belize a few years ago, which was really, really great. This time, unfortunately, online, but we make the best out of it. Hinterland is a film idea that I had a few years ago, 10 years ago, actually. I started out, before I started producing, as an editor, and I did some compositing as well. And I was always a fan of early expressionistic German films where you have these wrong angles and nothing is right anymore. The films that they experimented with in the 20s, like Dr. Caligari. And I always had the dream to make some kind of a film like Caligari, a modern expressionistic film with a blue screen technique. So we shot the whole film in blue screen studio together with our Oscar-winning director, Stefan Rusowitzki, because it was, of course, we don't have any Hollywood budgets in Austria. We have small budgets that we have to cope with, but still we needed a strong director and a strong possibility to finance this film. Before I talk too much, I quickly show you the trailer. Even out for my own pride, I have to say I don't like the trailer very much, this version, the English version, but I have to show you the one with the English subtitles. The German one is much better, but still, I show you that you get an overview about the film. Oh, wait. So, this one is right.
Es gibt einen Tod. Das Opfer ist bis zu seinen Oberschenkeln in einem Rattenkäfig gesteckt. Wer macht sowas Unmenschliches?
Unmenschlich? Schlagen Sie die Zeitung auf. Töten und quälen ist.
Kommen zurück, Inspektor Perk.
Der Weltkrieg ist verloren. Kriegsheimkehrer kommen in eine Welt, in der nichts mehr ist, wie es einmal war.
Die Frau ist nicht mehr da. Ja, alle haben geglaubt, sie kommen nicht mehr heim. Alle sind verrückt, weil sie nicht mehr haben, den Kaiser.
Er wurde übel misshandelt, bevor er in Ohnmacht gefallen ist.
Ein Kamerad von ihm. Die Hälfte aller Mordopfer sind Kriegsheimkehrer heutzutage. Und 2/3 aller Mörder.
Wenn jemand den Fall aufklären kann, dann er. Wer nicht getötet oder verkrüppelt wurde in diesem schrecklichen Krieg, ist mit einem schweren Dachschaden zurückgekommen.
Er schnitt ihm 19 Glieder ab. Keiner wurde von 19 Holzblöcken durchbohrt und ich gehe jede Wette mit dir ein, dass in dem Käfig 19 Ratten waren.
Er hat wieder zugeschlagen.
Den haben Sie auch gekannt? Glauben Sie, der Park könnte etwas mit der Sache zu tun haben?
Das kann doch auch Kernsleben sein. Ein neues Leben.
Ich traue dem nicht.
Sie wissen nicht wirklich, wer Perk ist, oder?
Sie sind die mit den Untersuchungen zu nahe.
Ich bin ein anderer Mensch als der damals in den Krieg gezogen ist.
So,
Very,
nice.
yeah, definitely.
That's
Hey,
fabulous.
But before we move on, let me give a plug for ticket sales. If you want to see Hinterland, you can get a festival pass from the Belize International Film Festival. Go to their website or Facebook page. You'll find a link for festival passes. You can get a pass for $50 Belize for the entire festival, which lets you see films, I believe, until November 14th. And if you just want to watch 1 or 2 films, I believe the tickets are $10 each per screening. So definitely highly recommend that if you do get a festival pass or you're looking for something to watch, check out Hinterland, and you can get your tickets from the Belize International Film Festival. Now, Oliver, I really want to break down some of the production and how you did it and just sort of nerd out on the technology. And I know, Bruce wants to as well, probably. But Joe is actually working on a production at the moment in his studio. So I want to just sort of skip ahead for a minute, if you don't mind, and bring Joe into the conversation, because Joe, you run a facility, a studio facility like what Oliver would have used in Austria to shoot his film. Tell us a little bit about Jet Sets.
Absolutely. A little background on myself. I've been in television production since the mid-'80s. About 10 years ago, I was invited to start up a production at CBS Entertainment here in New York City that utilized green screen and virtual production. That was Inside Edition at the time. Mm-hmm. And their interest was in reducing costs, reducing crew, and having the ability to share studio space within a single studio. And from there, at some point, I experimented a lot with a lot of different systems, render engines. I then soon thereafter came here with a render engine, which was given to me around 5 years ago or so. Virtual production really started to be discovered from by a lot of those in the production area. One is that, for the first time, graphic cards were were fast enough to really render with, consistency. The quality was starting to change from what we remember 15, 20 years ago, sort of cartoonish backgrounds with not a whole lot of detail, to stuff that was, quite usable. Mostly it was because of what was going on behind the scenes with the gaming engines. The gaming engines, as you know, such as Unreal, are a multi-billion-dollar business, and production started to pick up on that, right? Photorealism was starting to become a reality. I was seeing it here. I bought into a company that was the first to build from the ground up from the Unreal Engine itself. And it got a lot of notice about 5 years ago or so. Because of that, a lot of productions and films are starting to say, what is the point of, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars or more on sets when you can do a good part of it on green screen, and I think people such as Oliver recognized that a long time ago, from what he did with his terrific film there. And we've been building on that. And for any of those that follow the Unreal Engine and Epic Games and that sort of thing, they see what's going on, right? Everybody is now familiar with Mandalorian, who is shooting everything in their, what they refer to as their volume, right? Which is predominantly, they are using LED screens, but a certain amount of it is shot on green screen. Yeah. There's plus, as we all know here, there are pluses and minuses to all of it. We love the green screen for its flexibility. You can extend sets. So as most people know, you're not limited to the size of your green screen. Ours here behind me is roughly 17 by 17. It's a 2-wall scene. And people are rather astonished with the kind of, resolution and realism that you can get out of it. There are tricks that are such as ray tracing that are becoming more of a reality. I think with Unreal 5, that will be used. For those of you that aren't familiar with what ray tracing it's basically recreating lighting as it happens in a natural environment. Lighting will come out of a window or into a window and hit various things and bounce off, and it will create subtle shadows in places. And those are the kind of things that give you what they refer to as photorealism, right, in a scene. That is all coming to fruition for anyone that is following Unreal Engine and Epic Games. Unreal 5 is coming out probably in the next 3 to 6 months, is not only truly photorealistic, it will engage ray tracing. It has upped the game. I'm not sure how. I guess it's in the equations that were, built into it. But you're no longer limited to what we were limited to when I came in 10 years ago, which is you had to look at things like, polygon count, right? In those days, for me, it was about 700,000 polygons. When I came here a few years ago, it was about 10 to 20 million. It's now, I think, hit with Unreal 5, it will be closer to 1 trillion polygons in a scene.
What's a polygon for people who don't?
A polygon.
Like me who don't understand that.
So in a 3D scene, right, everything is made up of a polygon, right? A chair is made up of a series of polygons that are essentially stitched together to form the shape of something, whether it's a chair, a desk, a wall, right, a floor, right? And over those polygons, you have textures, wood, concrete, things of that nature, right? And then you have something called materials over it, which tells light what to do and how to react to light and that sort of thing. Reflections, shadows, et cetera, et cetera. And that all adds to a scene that could resemble any scene that the three of you, for example, are sitting in, right? A bookshelf behind you, or you know, or walls and furniture and that sort of thing. And now you can see mountains, rock formations that are made up of billions, if not a trillion polygons that have such tremendous detail that you can physically zoom in on them and see what you would see if you put your face up against, you know, a piece of wood, right? And they carry that kind of, you know, detail and resolution, and thus realism. And so with all of that, it's making, you know, less and less sense to, you know, work, you know, in a, you know, a real environment that's forcing you to get permits if you're outside, or building a scene that might cost, you know, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, right? And it's truly impressive, and it allows you for complete flexibility. We've done dance shows, we've done corporate jobs, we've done fashion shows, you know, pre-visualization for movies and that sort of thing. I have a short 3-minute piece, if you don't mind, I'll show it. It's
Sure, yeah,
a
please.
testimonial from the standpoint of one of my clients that speaks about a job that I did a little back, and it speaks to the creativity, if nothing else. And do I need to basically share my screen, which I'm hitting? Okay, perhaps I can do that here, and I'm going to highlight this. Let's see if I can share it. Is everyone seeing my screen potentially? I hope. Okay, here we go.
Don't know if anybody else is getting audio from this. I'm not.
Or I'm sorry, I'm pausing it. Are we not hearing my audio?
I'm not hearing it. I don't know
No
about
audio.
no
Oh,
audio.
thank you. Thank you for telling me. I'll take that back. And I'm sharing a screen. Let me see, is there a not stopping video, FaceTime built in? I'm seeing video settings. Can anyone walk me through why I'm not getting audio? Hey, Jeff, can I ask you about this? I'm playing Quinn, they're seeing it, they're not hearing my audio. I've just gone to settings here. Jeff will help us out. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so I'm hearing it as they play.
Right, but in your
Yeah,
right, but in your screen sharing options.
and I'm sharing, yeah.
Usually options here.
Well, just pause it if you don't mind. Or
All right, well, maybe we should.
we can move forward if
let's move on
if
with
need
it.
be. Yeah, sorry about that.
Now, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, Joe, just a couple of things I think that people in Belize might find interesting. You were
Yeah,
talking about like Inside Edition and virtual sets and how that sort of got started and evolved. One of the local television stations here that does a popular morning show is entirely a virtual set. You know, it's a green screen. So we're already starting to see this kind of technology being used in Belize. Now, the difference is, and I don't mean this to sound too critical, but I mean Hinterland and the local morning show, are night and day in terms of like how good the compositing is, how believable the virtual set is.
Right.
And you mentioned lighting, and maybe this is a good sort of segue to bring it back to Oliver, and even Bruce might want to chime in. The lighting must be absolutely critical to creating real looking virtual sets.
That is correct. I could speak about that at length. Lighting is important both for, achieving a good key. A good keyer obviously is important. We have both internal keyers that we use, and we also have an external keyer called an Ultimat, which is likely the best tool out there. So it's both the keying itself, which is important, and the lighting as it relates to matching foreground and background and following the virtual lighting, right?
Yeah. Now, Oliver, in Hinterland, you have a very distinct look. It's very moody, it's dark, it's wet. I mean, I can almost smell the sewage, in the canals when I'm watching it. I mean, it's like just a really, really incredible detailed world that you guys created. How hard was it to light your studio, to make that compositing work?
Yeah, This was one of the things that we underestimated probably most when we were budgeting the film. One was, of course, the VFX, but this can always explode. But the other thing was the lighting equipment. I can quickly show you. So basically, because you were referring to the look of the film, our idea was that somebody is leaving the First World War and has very fixed values like emperor, fatherland, and then he comes back. And as you know, Austria was a huge empire who collapsed basically to a tiny state overnight. And when he comes back, there's a fresh republic, there's no emperor, and all the values are not valid anymore. And Vienna has a very imperial architecture, and we wanted to distort this. But I show you quickly, maybe I have a presentation, but I don't go through the whole presentation. These are the two studios. It's a screen sharing already.
Yes.
I think the participants are taking the pink screen. These are the two studios where we got in. One was in Luxembourg and one was in Vienna. And despite lightening the blue screen properly, that it's really not too shadowy, we always had all this lighting equipment which the DOP could shift to. And when we were shooting a night scene, and then we were shooting an inside scene, then we were shooting a plain daylight scene, we had some kind of a remote control to create this lighting situation. And the lighting equipment, we have it there for the whole time, was quite expensive, of course, quite intense. This was one of the things that we underestimated most, probably. But this was one of the things that I have to say, I have some background voice, which are quite...
I don't know, is that in your studio, Joe? Are we hearing? Sounds like I can hear someone having a conversation off camera.
Yes, they're probably hearing them. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
If you want to maybe just ride your mute button.
Sure.
Hey, Bruce, curious for you as a visual effects supervisor, what is your role in working like with the DP to achieve that look? Because I mean, you're going to get the stuff on the back end, and if it isn't lit properly, by the time it arrives on your desktop, it's too late.
Well, one of the nice things, Brent, is that I'm also with production when they're shooting. And so, for instance, on the Power Rangers movie, I worked, because I was standing right beside him, I worked with Matthew Lloyd, who was the cinematographer on the film. And we talked a lot about in pre-production, how he was going to light things, the style that he liked. I was really taken with his work on the series of Daredevil. And we worked to make sure that when he lit things, I had complementary things that I could do in post-production that would complement what he was doing, and vice versa. We shot one of the first scenes we shot in this big cavern where the kids find their spaceship and get their superpowers. The set was pretty impressive, but the set was a tiny fraction of what you saw on screen, because most of what we saw on screen was digital. And Matt was really key in lighting things in such a way that my set extensions looked like they were believable, so that you can't see the line between where practical ends and digital begins. One of the things I'm impressed with Oliver's show about is the art direction and the amount of lighting, especially what you were talking about with all of that moodiness, to be able to carry it through, to make sure that stuff blends properly, because you don't want to get pulled out of the story. And it's as to what Joe's doing in New York there, we tried to mimic that in RoboCop, because we had Samuel Jackson making these presentations like he was on a live set, and we tried to mimic what a lot of these television stations do, only just a little bit more advanced, because given that RoboCop's supposed to take place in the future a little bit, but lighting and production design is key, because it has to blend with the visual effects stuff that's being added months later in post. And one of the things that we do on the projects that I work on is that I'm present for photography, and to make sure that stuff, so that we shoot things that are going to work. And it's a real collaboration between the filmmakers, especially the cinematographer, and myself, so that my teams can do what they got to do.
Now, Oliver, one of the things you shared with me, a sort of a behind the scenes look. I don't know if you're able to just sort of roll that while we're talking, the one with the wipes. So we see the blue screen, and then we see the composites. But what I was really fascinated with was, certain scenes you have actual objects included in the set. It's not just blue screen, but you'll bring in a desk, or you'll bring in a lamp, or there's one shot, I believe, where they're like in an art gallery, and there's a couple of easels, but not all of them. So in terms of incorporating the actual like prop pieces, like actual organic prop pieces, how did you guys make the decision of like what you needed on set and what you would just sort of, fix in post, as we say, later?
This was quite easy. I have to say one thing up front. What was maybe a little bit unusual for the film is that we allowed this artificial look to be artificial. We didn't want it to have a really photorealistic film because we wanted to have a modern expressionistic film. And this was something which helped, of course, because sometimes we could say, okay, it doesn't look completely real, but it's on purpose, even if it sometimes was not, I have to admit. But it really helped. But still, it was something where after 15 minutes, you forget that you are in an artificial world, and the whole film sucks you in, I think, in a quite well way. It, by the way, won in Locarno at the Piazza Grande the Audience Award. So for 8,000 people, it's the largest jury in the world. Obviously, it worked. Regarding the props, it was quite easy. Everything which is touched by the actors, used by the actors, was on set. There was one big question about real floors, if we should have plaster, for example, or not. It turned out it would have been best if we would have left it away, but we shot some film scenes with plaster. I can show a clip of these wipes that you see.
Yeah, I would love for people to see that, because I think that sort of, pulls the curtain back and shows exactly.
Jump in case we have too much. It's 2 minutes. I play it. If we have.
Yeah, or we could just talk over it. Because it's just music in the background.
The principle you get quite fast.
Das Opfer ist bis zu seinen Oberschenkeln in einem
I wait until the QuickTime is on the screen. Or do we have such a heavy delay?
I don't know. I'm seeing what looked
on the
like
pink screen. I still see my face.
Yeah.
Wait, it says it's being. So now I'm sharing the screen, but I still see my face.
Yeah, that's showing your trailer. Actually, well, I've got that same asset here. So is this the one? Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, the VFX preview. Yeah, exactly. So just go ahead and roll it so we can talk over this.
Yeah,
but it'll give people an idea.
Sure, I think the pink screen is still my face. It's not sharing, right?
Yeah, no, we've got it.
No, we're seeing it, Oliver.
Ah, now it's working. Okay, so I play it and it makes a sound low that we can talk.
You can take the sound down and we'll just talk over it. Yeah.
Basically, here you see it. This is the set of the final film, and then you see how it was shot. So there were some props that were used by the actors. This is another principle, which of course, due to the technique, was quite nice, that we could make crowd duplication, because all the costumes were much too expensive to give costumes to 200 people. But if you have 30 extras and then you just multiply them, it's quite affordable.
Well, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, in terms of like budgeting. When you decided to make your film this way, did it save you money? Did it save you time, or did it become more expensive? Like, what are the pros and cons to doing this?
No, I think most of the period pieces which are shot in Vienna, the boring thing is that you always have the 5 same streets, 5 same places that are still adaptable for a period piece. And I remember that always the script was in the industry for 15 years, and everybody said it's much too expensive, we cannot do it. Because one of the nice things is, in a way, it's not completely true, but in a way, you can change a location much more. If you shoot in green screen, you shoot in green screen. You can just shoot in green screen. If you shoot in real location, you always make one round before you go into production to make the locations, to shift the scene to the same location, that you can shoot on one location 3 scenes, and you don't have to change location, because of course it's 2 hours to go from one location to the next. And in green screen, we could play and have 200 locations for the film. This was something quite unusual, which only was possible due to this technique, I think.
But the post-production process must take a lot longer.
Yeah, it was a perfect lockdown project. We were finished when the lockdown came. We knew that we have to work with a very good Belgium studio on Zoom over 1 year, and this is what happened. So it was quite comfortable. Yeah.
But
yes,
very outstanding.
Yeah. Sorry, Joe, you're raising your hand there. Your mic is still muted, Joe.
Yeah, there are just 2 points before I go that I just like to add. Something that I do say to my clients when they come in is the vetting process, is a very big part of it. Vetting your sets, rehearsal, setting your positions, that sort of thing. That's what we're doing today, for example. And that's a big part of it. I'll make up a number and say 75% of it when working in, virtual production is all about vetting your set, working with stand-ins, doing your walkthroughs, and that sort of thing, because there's a lot of discovery during that time, and it's extremely important. You can almost not take not overdo it, let's say, right? Things that we find at the 11th hour. Oh, I didn't see that little strange, virtual light in the corner there somewhere. Let's fix it. That kind of thing, very important. The other thing I would say is in working with the Unreal Engine, they are set up for independent projects, for student projects and that sort of thing. You can download the Unreal Engine for free and start working with it. There are schools out there that are training their students, in the use of that, the importance of it, whether it's for gaming or for production purposes, and they can do that. And there are other render engines that you can get student licenses for and that kind of thing, and working with your projects. So there are options out there for those that are working with lower budgets. So
yeah, Joe, if you have a link to Unreal Engine, if you want to just put that in the chat, then all the people who are watching will be able to see that. And we're also going to get into talking a little bit about that during the second half of the session.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
About other another software program that Bruce sort of turned me on to last week, which I'm kind of excited about. But we'll save that reveal for a little bit later. Oliver, I just wanted to ask you another question that I was just wondering when I was watching, especially watching after I saw your sort of behind the scenes look for your actors. And again, I talked about, how just the atmosphere that you guys have created with your world. Was it a challenge for the actors to get themselves into that in their head? They're in an air-conditioned studio. It's dry. The craft services table is 25 feet away, and yet they're supposed to be acting as if they're in this damp, dark, post-World War I, hellscape. What was it like for the actors to be able to pull off those performances?
Yeah, no, of course it was. For our main actor, the main actor who's really good in this film, basically, he was not on an acting school. He's very famous right now, but 6 years ago he was still working on construction sites, and then somebody discovered him, and he became quite famous now in Germany and Austria. And for him, he said it was the strangest thing that he had no haptic on the floor, that the floor was always completely even. But to be honest, of course, it was difficult for the actors, but on the other hand, what do you do if you are on a small theater stage? You imagine what is around you. You imagine that you are the Prince of Denmark and there's a castle around you. I think what was really strange was for the director, because usually what you do, you come to a set, you put your camera somewhere, you shoot the scene, then you put the camera somewhere else. And what was really strange and took a lot of cognitive power was to turn the set in the green screen, because usually we had two scenes where we had 360 degree green screen or blue screen, but most of the time you have just 180 or even 90. You have one direction where you can shoot. So what you have to do, you don't put your camera and put it in another place, but you turn your set and you have to cope in your head, where are you right now, how much have you to shift. And so this was, I think, quite intense for the director.
Now, Oliver, you mentioned earlier, you were saying that, when you first started conceptualizing this film, you didn't think, it would even be possible just because of the cost of technology or the cost of this process. And Bruce, I'm curious, you've been doing visual effects probably 30 years. What kind of changes in the technology have we seen in terms of, how much it took, how much the resources, the budgets you needed to pull off. I think of when I was a kid watching the Christopher Reeves Superman movie, and we were all blown away by, oh my God, it looks like you can fly. And I watch it today and it's like, oh my God, I think I can see the cables, attaching it to the ceiling. So in terms of the technology, how much has it changed in the last, 30, even the last decade?
Technology advances at an insane pace. And one of the things that's really interesting with what Joe's doing in New York, and with especially what Oliver's done, is that I'm a huge fan of Unreal. Joe's talking about that you can download student licenses and things. I was sitting yesterday afternoon with one of my students lighting a scene in the Unreal Engine. because that's a regular piece of technology. Now, the interesting thing about that is, especially for the way that Mandalorian's made, is that it's produced on great big volumes. So basically they've got LED screens that are huge size with great resolution. Well, that's not any different than Cary Grant having rear projection behind him, 50 years ago. The difference is how good the gear is. Rear projection is not a new idea. The way that it's used now is the new idea, and the resolution at which it can be done and how fast things can be adapted. Oliver talks about turning the set, and he's right. I've had to do that where we're shooting things on a big screen. We've got 180 degrees. A good example would be Black Panther. That whole thing takes place on the African continent in that magic kingdom of Wakanda. Did we ever go to Africa? No, not once, not ever. Most of that stuff was shot in the state of Georgia. But what you do have to do is that you have limitations on how big those sets are, and the sets get turned, and that's really hard for people. But the thing that's interesting, and to answer your question, Brent, is that the thing that's different now is the tech and how fast it evolves. And Joe had a really good point about talking about, 10 years ago doing sets and stuff, especially when people started going to virtual sets. Funny enough, Brent and I ran into each other in Prairie Land, Canada here not too long ago. And we sat on a set that the only thing real that's in that news set is the desk. The entire set is virtual. Well, now, and Joe leads to it with all of a sudden now having ray tracing and things like that available in real time, now you can do that stuff. But the idea is really simple, and the idea is old. Superman had rear projection in it in the 70s. The 40s and 50s had rear projection in black and white. We're doing the same kind of thing now, but we've had to up our game because we can, and that's the thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's all 4K. The job we're doing today is all 4K.
Nice.
And it just gets better and better, all real time. The editing, as you spoke about a moment ago, is happening just as we speak, and we're moving around the set and we're making that all happen. And I invite anyone to reach out to me if they'd like at jetsets.com and has any questions, any students, any indie, producers or directors out there. I'd be happy to answer any questions for everyone. I want to thank everybody for having me here, and very nice meeting all of the esteemed guests here. Thank you, Bruce and Oliver and Brent, for having me. I appreciate it. So thank you.
No, thank you, Joe. You told me when we started, you only had 20 minutes. You've given us almost 40, so really appreciate your generosity of time. Great meeting you virtually.
I appreciate that.
And good luck with the shoot you got going on there.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you.
All right.
Great day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Now, of course, the session is going to continue. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but if anybody watching this session has questions, feel free to put it in the chat if you're on Zoom or if you're watching on Facebook. There's also, you can post a question in the Facebook comments on the Belize Film Festival Facebook page.
May I add one little thing?
Yeah, please, Oliver, go ahead.
Really important because which Bruce just mentioned, and I can show you one example. It's always, the technology is interesting and it's always progressing, and of course it makes things easier, but it's never about technology. It's always about the idea. You can ask yourself, did the ability to print books change the world? I said no. The idea that everybody should be able to read the Bible changed the world, and not the ability to print books. And if you look, for example, I have something here in this is our early mud paintings. This is what we did in Hinterland. This is basically, they were printed or painted on a glass, and then the camera was shooting through, and then you got a complete different picture of the whole picture. The idea is very early. You see here the Thief of Baghdad is from 1940. So the idea was always there. It's about how can you use it creatively, and this is, I think, in a Belizean context. How can you use these technologies to make something special, something original? It's not about we will never have Hollywood budgets, and it's really about that, about how to use it and about having the idea.
And Oliver, you're exactly right, Oliver. And even for those of us that do have Hollywood budgets, my big thing when we're sitting down to do pre-production on any film was usually a director at some point during those meetings at the very beginning, before we're going to camera, is asking, and then rightfully so, because they want to know what's going on. Bruce, how are you going to do this? How is your team going to pull that off? And my response to them is always, you shouldn't worry about that. You should worry about telling your story and working with your cast, and I'll be right there. And if you want to know in the moment, hey, is this going to work? I'll be standing right beside you to tell you yes or no. And I do the same thing when I'm lecturing now, when I teach, is that technology is going to change. If I teach you about technology, I'm going to have to reteach you everything again next week. So I'll tell you what, let's teach technique. I'm going to teach you why we're doing the shot, how we develop the shot. One shot, one thought is what I always say. And then we'll go and figure out which buttons to push, because I might have to teach you a different set of buttons next week. But the technique is good. And I'm by trade, I'm a compositor. And I was, relatively good at it. But I teach technique now in software that I never used when I was at the height of being an artist, because it didn't exist yet. The technology didn't exist. But my techniques are sound, and they're transferable from any technology to almost any other tech. Like I said, I was lighting a scene with a student yesterday afternoon in Unreal, and I've only started doing that in the last 12 months. I used to light everything in all kinds of different other softwares. So you're always learning to push new buttons. But I love the fact, Oliver, that you got production art that shows where your inspirations came from. And when I'm teaching, I do exactly the same thing. So that just goes to show that you are a filmmaker, sir.
So the $64,000 question. Well, no, we wouldn't even have $64,000 in Belize. But the question from a local Belizean filmmaker is, how do we apply this tech and these techniques to what we're doing here, given the fact that we don't have a jet set studio here? We don't have, huge production houses with arrays of computers that do the compositing for us. We're making films with, DSLR cameras and MacBook, computers. What can we do? What's possible now in a place like Belize to incorporate visual effects in our films?
The first thing you have to do, and I'm going to let Oliver take this one, but I'm going to lead it in for him. The first thing you have to do is have an idea. And as soon as you have an idea, then you can decide, can you shoot that idea practically? Or then do you need visual effects to create that idea? But the first thing starts with, what are you going to shoot? I'm going to leave that with you, Oliver, and then I'll talk about button pushing.
No, you're completely right. It's about the idea. I think one should not aim for making something like Hollywood. We will never succeed in small countries. What we did in Hinterland was to say, how can we use these technologies to make something which shouldn't look photorealistic the whole time, which can look artificial, but how can we create it to create a very special atmosphere? What you always, and world sets are always looking for in films, what is a unique selling point? And it's not about making Hollywood, but little bit good, but about making something special, something own out of it. And talking about budgets, by the way, of course you have to generate good materials, but in the end we are running out of money. I have to say that I went to this homepage Fiverr and well paid for their conditions, made 2 or 3 shots with some young guys from Bangladesh. It was not something that you could make in a professional context, but I think it's still, I think what Bruce said is the most important thing. It's about the idea. Of course, to aim for something which is possible. I had this background in compositing when I started Hinterland. I always were wondering, why are period pieces so boring? Can we not make a dark expressionistic comic, a mix of Caligari and Sin City? And then we developed a style, and especially we developed a style which was affordable. So out of the idea, I can quickly show you, just that you get a bit of an idea, not the whole presentation, but just we had, if I look here in the matte paintings, we had this idea to say, this is Vienna today. We cannot work with these real locations because they are too modern. How can we? And then we just said it's quite easy to transform a valley like this one within Photoshop into a dark matte painting. It's something that a good Photoshop artist can do in half a day.
Yeah.
And then we can probably use this. And then we made some tests with actors. And then we said, hey, this could really work. Then we had an online database where we had a script of each scene. And then we had a storyboard. And then we had references. And we had historical archive materials from a guy in the archive. And then we made these all these drafts and layouts from the art direction. And as soon as we shot the film, everybody basically we knew how it will look in the end. Still, there was 1 year of creative decisions. It was not over then. Yeah. But it's about the idea. And then as soon as you have the idea, to make it affordable and execution, or to be able to execute this idea, to really transform it into the film.
So in terms of, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Brent, and one of the other things is that it doesn't have to be photoreal in some cases. Yeah. So my last, that's always for the kind of work I do, is that photoreal, that's the brief, is that make it look so believable that everybody does. Whether you know in your head it's believable or not, you want to stay in the story. And one of the things I loved about when I was watching the Hinterland trailer was that's right. It only takes about 3 shots for you to realize this is a stylized piece. It's like opening a beautiful graphic novel. And then for the rest of the trailer, I was only concerned with following along what was going on in the story. Now, I had to read the English subtitles because I don't really speak German, but never once was I pulled out of that short little story in the trailer because I didn't believe the picture. The picture was appropriate for what it was that we were doing. I used to make a TV show, Oliver, called Stargate SG-1. And we did that for about 10 years. And my thing for that was, it doesn't have to look real. It just has to look cool. Because as long as it helped push the story forward, as long as every effect was believable in the context of whatever that story is, and I mean, you get stylized the longer you work on a television series, then it works. And Brent, you can do that in Belize. Yeah. We were talking about softwares that are accessible. You can run on your laptop. You can go and shoot some stuff with your DSLR, and then you can track that stuff. And all of a sudden, you can drop things into the shot.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be photoreal to tell the story. It just has to be appropriate.
Yeah. So one of the softwares that Joe mentioned was Unreal Engine. Obviously, Bruce, you're familiar with it, but there's another one that you were telling me about called 3D Equalizer.
Yes.
3dequalizer.com.
Yep.
Is the website. So how are they similar in terms of what they do?
Nope.
Okay.
they're both bits and pieces. It's like saying if you've got an automobile, it's like saying is the brake pedal and the wheel, do they do the same thing? Well, no, but they work together to create something that stops the car safely. 3D Equalizer is a way of analyzing the motion in footage and then being able to replicate that motion with a virtual camera on your computer. So say, for instance, you're sitting there with your nice microphone and you're talking to Oliver and I want to put a dinosaur on your shoulder, but I want you to be able to move around in the shot and the dinosaur to be stuck to your shoulder. Well, I can use 3D Equalizer to determine what camera you were using, what lens you shot on, and what the motion of your body is. And then I could make a dinosaur stick on your shoulder, And I was going to ask, is it Oliver's got all kinds of shots in his movie, and I can tell that some of it is moves that were added in post-production. So 2D moves that were done in compositing. A lot of shots are beautifully orchestrated insofar as the composition. So the camera's locked, but I can see moving shots in your show. There's a great shot of the car driving away from the camera. That's in the trailer, except when you guys were shooting it, the car didn't move at all. The camera did. Mm-hmm. And so there's all kinds of ways to trick things. And I was going to ask Oliver, do you know what the special effects company was using to do your motion tracking on your movie? Because they might have indeed be using Equalizer.
I'm not sure about that. I think mainly because I was trained in something that you can easily afford, After Effects, when I started.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But of course, they used the node-based programs and used.
They probably composited in Nuke.
Nuke, then used Nuke and the 3D. Really, I think they have the most high-end softwares that you can use.
So it'd be Nuke and Maya and stuff. But
Maya and Houdini, as far as I know, and very complicated trackers. But of course, as you say, there are simple softwares which can do the same thing as well.
That's right. That's right. And it's the trick, like I said, Brent, is that there's a great shot in Oliver's trailer where there's a car driving away from the camera, except the car never moved. They just had the camera. And then when you composite the shot, it appears that. And we do the same thing. I mean, I worked with a team on a movie with a superhero that the whole movie almost is shot underwater. And do you think we ever went underwater when we were doing Aquaman? No. It's kind of like, did we go to Africa when we were making Black Panther? No. So it's not so much about what buttons to push, is what are the most appropriate buttons? And there's always limitations. When you and I were young punks learning how to do TV back in the 80s, I took a job at the second place you and I ever worked together simply because they had one box. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to learn how to use that. And it was like, how many different ways can I exploit what this can do? Well, now it's at the point where we don't have to go, what can we do with this tool? It's what story do we want to tell? And what's the appropriate tool to tell the story? And sometimes it is indeed like Oliver's talking, is that when I'm making these big films, I have an entire building that contains the render farm because it requires so much air conditioning. You wouldn't want to put people in it. It's so cold. But you can also do the same thing on your Macintosh, sitting at home, to the same extent, as long as it's telling that story. And so then it's just a matter of, well, what is the story that you want to tell?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned After Effects a minute ago.
Jump in for a second. I think what Bruce said is very important. I was just reminded that when all these visual effects stuff, the modern ones, the computer generated effects came up, there was this big company, Industrial Light and Magic, as you know. Mm-hmm. And there's this famous film by Kurosawa, Dreams, where Industrial Light and Magic put out everything that they had. And for example, there was one episode of a guy walking through Van Gogh paintings. And today, if you watch it, it looks a little bit silly, but still it works. And I think this is as Bruce said, it has to be photorealistic. Make something special out of it, and still it works. After 2 minutes, you forget what it is about. You can even make a very plain lightning and say, okay, it's a children's drawing. And suddenly out of the little painted people, real people are going, they can be flat lightened. It's about the story that you tell, and use it not to be realistic, but to be original. This is, I think, a dilemma. If you look in these early expressionistic films, for example, it does not look just a second. These are the great references that we refer to, Caligari. And it does not look expensive or great. It looks in a way cheap and papier-mâché and build it, but still it works. It creates an own atmosphere. And this is what you can do. You don't need money for that, to have an original idea, not to work photorealistic. I think it's a strange time that everything in films today has to be photorealistic, and the atmosphere of non-realism is not really used.
Well, even if you talk about like sort of non-photorealistic, I mean, we've been doing that. Just you think about when you edit just like a silly news story or something, and you want to, or like any kind of video, and you want to make it look like it's old footage, right? You make it sepia tone. Well, the world wasn't sepia tone back then, but as soon as you add that sepia tone, overlay, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, that must be from like the 1800s, or you put some film scratches in it, right? So it's not like we haven't already figured out that that's kind of I don't want to call it a cheat, but in a way it is, because it's a way of saying, okay, listen, this isn't real, but we want you to get in your head that this is supposed to be something that doesn't exist, because it's funny. I always joke when when I'm on a set and they're doing that kind of like reenactment kind of thing. And, we'll be doing like here in Belize, it'll be like a Mayan ritual or something. And they're shooting it for a reenactment. And I'll make a joke to the director about like, make sure you add some film scratches, because it didn't have very good film stock back in, 500 AD, but in your head, right, you just associate, okay, it must be old. Yeah. So creating that sort of like unreal world, we've been doing that all along. But it is something I think that, for a local filmmaker to think about that when you're planning, say, I want to incorporate some visual effects. It's like, if you can't do it photoreal, then creatively, creating something that is not real is going to forgive a lot of maybe imperfections. We only have about 5 minutes left, so I do want to try and just drill down a little bit on the local market. You mentioned After Effects earlier. I know we have a lot of editors in Belize that are quite proficient with After Effects. So it's not like people aren't used to using these types of technologies to enhance their video products. The learning curve of going into like 3D Equalizer or Unreal Engine or something, how daunting or how much of a challenge is that? I mean, obviously he's probably spent a lifetime getting great at it, but if somebody wanted to commit themselves to learning how to do some pretty good visual effects, what kind of learning curve are we looking at?
It really depends on the software. I'm probably the worst guy to ask this question because I've only been practicing at it for about 30 years. And again, good technique is transferable from software to software. So I know enough about this new compositing software as I can open it and I can actually do shots, but I'm not a new compositor. I'm a flame and inferno compositor. And that's a whole different way of thinking. But the techniques are a lot of the same techniques are applicable across platforms. Unreal Engine, the cool thing about that is that Relic Entertainment provides all kinds of things for free for you to learn their system. One of the things I found as I've been teaching, because I teach now for the Center for Entertainment Arts, and with the addition to the lectures and stuff that I give and the exercises and things that I hand out, is that a whole pile of the students have opened me up to the fact that if you want to learn anything, use YouTube, and there's all kinds of simple things. And it's not just people showing off, hey, I know how to do this, so here it is that they're giving great examples. It's kind of like Oliver opening all these great examples and showing us before and afters. I would have liked to have done that today, Brent, except my NDAs preclude me from showing you before and afters on most of my movies,
right?
Because they don't want you to see what it looked like before we finished it. But that's a nice thing, is that you can access all of this stuff. The manufacturers have stuff, and the internet's awesome. When I was learning how to be a compositor back in the 80s and 90s, I stayed up all bloody night after night after night, with books about this thick, trying to figure out how to make stuff work, because there were no user groups, no internet where you could just go and look stuff up and then see a YouTube video of somebody else doing it. One of the things now is that everything is so much more accessible.
Hey, we're almost out of time, but there's just one question here from Michael, he's been watching all the sessions today. So thank you very much, Michael, for your attendance and your interest in this. He says, any thoughts on Blender?
Oh yeah, it's awesome. for the price point. I'm the worst guy to ask because I've got access to all the really big, expensive stuff. But there's all kinds of awesome platforms that are not that cost prohibitive, that run on your laptop, and Blender's one of them. If you want to know a little trick, every once in a while, I use stuff that doesn't cost $1 million. There are shots in a Clint Eastwood film called Invictus, where there is slow motion grass as you're watching the South African rugby team play, floating through the air. And I generated all that grass with Blender.
Well, and even Oliver, you mentioned using Fiverr to outsource some stuff, so there are ways to do this that's affordable. We're down to the last couple of minutes. We have to, I would love to keep going, but we do have another session coming up in half an hour where we're going to talk about animation. And I'm sure a lot of the same people who are watching this session are going to want to tune in for that, because that's one thing in Belize, I think, where we are possibly even maybe a little bit ahead of the game in terms of our local talent pool is animators. We do some really, really good animation and design work in Belize. So that's coming up in 30 minutes. I think we're gonna have to wrap it up there. You just mentioned Blender, about affordability. Also, the one thing that blew me away about 3D Equalizers, I mean, the licensing fees, I mean, you could, I think it's about 400 Belize dollars for a month, which doesn't sound super cheap, but when you consider what you're getting for that, and the fact that you can just license it, if you need it for a month, you license it for a month.
That's
so
right.
If you're putting together a budget, so even a commercial producer in Belize that wants to go heavy in the visual effects could look at licensing something like 3D Equalizer just for the week or the month that they need it.
That's
bill
right.
it to the client, and they're done with it. Of course, you have to invest the time to learn how to use it. But the great thing with this tech is it gets easier to learn. Even though we couldn't have imagined this stuff 20 years ago, but it's surprisingly easy how a lot of this stuff is to learn these days. Guys, it's 2:30 in Belize. We are out of time. I want to thank both of you, and of course Joe, who did have to leave. earlier, very much for giving us your time today. Great conversation. I love nerding out with you guys about all this kind of stuff in filmmaking. Just making sure there wasn't any other questions that we missed. No, we're all good there. Just a couple of people saying thank you, which appreciate the feedback. Like I said, Oliver's film Hinterland is one of the official selections for the Belize International Film Festival. So if you haven't already got your festival pass, you can get that for 50 Belize dollars, and you can screen that film and a plethora of other fantastic films from around the world and the region. The feature films, however, are only available for audiences in Belize. So just know that if you're watching from outside Belize, you won't be able to access the film. And if you just want to do a single film or a couple of films, you can buy individual tickets for $10 each. So definitely do that, not only to support the film festival, but it's a great opportunity to see some great films that you probably otherwise wouldn't even know about. So gentlemen, sorry, we got to go. It's 2:31. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we can do something again the next Belize International Film Festival or sooner if possible.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. All the best to Belize.
All right.
Great for
Take
doing
care,
all the
everybody.
pioneer work.
All right. Much appreciated. Have a great day, guys.
Bye-bye.